Welcome to the Glide Academy podcast. I'm your host, Ez Chandra, and on this episode, we're going to be talking about creative thinking in a digital world with Juliet Street. Thank you for coming to the show, Juliet.
Thanks, Ez. Nice to be here.
I am going to do a bit of an intro so that the viewers know who you are. So I've got a bit of a bio here. So Juliet Street is a brand strategist, creative director, and creative mentor. You've worked in the industry for nearly 30 years, which is including running your own brand agency, Luminosity, for over 18 years. Mm-hmm. So a lot of experience there. You became highly adept at working immersively with both the client strategy side and the creative team. Mm-hmm. You've worked across a broad range of industries from medical, education, building, engineering, manufacturing, technology, consulting, from startups to SMEs to global companies. Mm-hmm. So great breadth of experience there. And you then sold the business / merged mm-hmm. With another agency to set up and run the branding arm for a further 5 years. But since then, you've moved on and you've now started your own consultancy, which is Creative Mojo. Very exciting. And that's going to be focusing on giving back, mentoring and optimizing talent and having a bit of fun, obviously.
Absolutely, having fun.
Awesome. So we're going to kick off the discussion around what you're kind of doing now. We'll lead more into that, which is creative mentoring. But first, it's about the creative industry. We're obviously in marketing, so we have a lot of people who need to be nurtured in terms of their creativity. Can you talk to us a bit more about those people and how they can be nurtured in a creative environment, but been producing, optimizing results for business? Mm-hmm. And kind of your background around that.
Sure. Yeah. So those people you're talking about being team members, staff,
correct,
as opposed to clients who need nurturing and creativity.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Because everybody needs it, I believe it. But with having a team that has a component of creatives in it, and I think it's probably good to start with even defining what creativity looks like. My world's been very much in the graphic design space, so there's creatives that are very visual artists. There's also copywriters, that's obviously very creative, photographers, etc. However, I also think that creative thinking is a way that a brain works, and you may be doing a role that doesn't look creative, but it actually is creative. And a lot of creative thinkers end up in problem-solving roles because our brains work like this instead of in a linear pathway. And this is one of the real sort of light bulb moments that I've had in the last 5 years of recognizing what was actually happening as a natural thing in me and in the people I worked with for years. So I'm talking about people whose brains work like this, and that means that very quickly we go broad, we can see a whole lot of things at once, and we have to narrow down and hone to come to a point, and then it can go out again. So that's sometimes people call it design thinking. It might be in planning a strategy of some sort.
Yeah, sure. And also, like, creative people have, I believe, their own set of values as well, right? Like compared to, say, someone that's a bit pragmatic, or mathematical, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is very much, I guess, where the tension comes. So for me, as a born creative and a designer, I'm trained and then worked for many years, I saw that in my own life, and I've seen it in all of the creative, amazing talent I've worked with, where we've moved from a passion that is driven by creativity into a space that is commercial, therefore driven by metrics and numbers and dollars and timesheets. Yes. And those things can coexist together, but it's damn hard.
Yeah, and we all know about timesheets.
Absolutely. and I've had my own business. I understand the reality of that. It's a huge responsibility. And clients I've worked with, as you've said, global corporations down to SMEs and startups spending their very own hard-earned cash. And so I really respect that. The challenge comes in what cost does that have on a human being that is wired and with certain values to exist in their ultimate state in a certain way. So how do we, and I've seen this working with teams, how do we actually still nurture what is, for some people who are creatives, essentially oxygen? We think we can just reduce the amount of creative input that we give them or allow them, or the space, or rein them in. But the reality is, if you do it for too long, that machine is not being oiled. And that's actually why you've employed them.
Yes.
Is for that brilliance and that mind that is going to go like this, and with good nurturing it can get there faster. So that becomes a commercial sort of a benefit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of creative teams or agencies will nurture that individual on an aspect around their deliverables, like the outcomes.
Yes.
So what campaigns they can come up with and all that sort of stuff. But what you're saying is it's just as important to make sure that that individual is nurtured in a creative level as well, so that just keeps going on an ongoing basis. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's something I've known for probably forever, but in the last probably 5 years it's become absolutely crystal clear to me the incredible power and what I call creative equity that is in individuals when you have and I'm talking about talent.
Yes.
So I've worked with really, really high caliber. I'll give you an example. So how my business came about was I went for a trip to the UK. I've been there many times. I reconnected with an ex-employee of mine who was an employee friend. I mean, most people I work with end up becoming my friends, so it's hard to call them employees, but an absolutely ridiculously talented individual from Perth who'd gone to London about 15 years ago. He's a creative director in a packaging company. It's a big firm. There's about 30 people. He runs a creative team of 5 within that. And he's using, in reality, probably about 10% of his creative potential. And I mean, potential's a massive thing. It's actually it's a never-ending sort of a.
And that's because most of his time is taken up by all the administrative duties which come with his role.
That's right. And the logistics. There's people to manage and to do and to organise. He uses it in these little pockets of time. But then not only that, the people around him, there are creatives, but it's how do we sort of feed each other. So what happens is we can go for a long time, and if you're not allowed to get the spark that comes from 2 creatives zinging off each other and feeding each other, you get depleted. And essentially what happened was he got burnout. Yeah. Not just on a creative level, but just on a life level, because remembering that creativity is oxygen for these people and fuel. So he is a brilliant painter, an artist, an oil painter, and he did paint, but he sort of really backed off on that. And so we reconnected and said, let's just do some awesome things. We started talking about his passion for other areas of his life that were creative, that were maybe not obviously in his workspace. We didn't even really talk about the workspace. And we were just bouncing off each other and getting all of this energy, and this mojo was just incredible. And we dreamed the big dreams, and we just went to the places that we don't allow ourselves to.
Which is what artists do, like natural
Absolutely.
artists. Yeah.
So that was just a conversation. And I honestly was so spun out by the power of it. And he said his name's Marky, and I just hope the world can meet him one day, because he's got no idea. He's got an idea of talent, but of how good he is, but he really doesn't know how to sort of optimise it himself. And then share it, really, I think it's about that.
Yeah.
So in the discussion, it was literally like we were jumping up and down. It was like we'd taken drugs.
So it was like a light bulb moment.
It was more than a light bulb. It was like, I joke, he said to me, Jules, that was like drugs or something. And I said, it was amazing. And we talked about who gets to do this? And we said it's kind of like musicians. When they get together and they have a jam session, and they're very talented, but they go in, there's no music, they no paper to read, they just look at each other and they start feeling the vibe and playing their instruments, and before you know it, it's this incredible, just experiential thing. Yeah. And that's what was happening. So I started to call these sessions creative jam sessions.
Right, okay.
So that was late last year. We then committed, when I came back to Perth, to keep on talking about these things that really float our boat. And lo and behold, after just a couple of months of doing that every week for a couple of hours, just on the phone, crazy hours because of the time difference, but just because we loved it, the directors at his work said, Marky, something's happened, what's been going on? And he said, well, I've just been chatting to Jules, and we have these sessions, and they're like, this is amazing, we can see the
difference.
impact
Yeah.
on how you are at work. We can see what is happening with your daily sort of input and output, etc. So they said, can we please pay her? Because we want to invest in you, and you've been with us for 13 years, and we've actually maybe never, spent on your professional development. And they love him, and he's a very, very good employee. He's a lovely, lovely man. And that was amazing, and I was like, wow, I'm going to get paid for this thing.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't want to do it. I actually was I didn't want to do it for the money.
Yeah.
Because I was so committed to just giving back at that point. But it's ended up being the foundations and the truth behind everything I do now. I've seen the transformation. With then the journey being many months of doing that now, we're probably coming up to nearly a year, amazingly. And they still pay me, and we still do these sessions, and we'd do it if we weren't getting paid.
Yeah.
But we were able to transition from talking about his outside of work creativity to actually discussing real world incidences and challenges with the day-to-day of the commercial space he was in. Yeah. And we tackled all of those head on the fly every week.
Yeah.
So
like a mentoring
absolutely powerful, and it's just been transformative for him and for me.
I guess the creatives in the industry, they are cultivated in the sense that they're given the tools to write, say, better ad copy, so they can do a course on how to do that. You can get a course on how to come up with creative messaging, dealing with designers, graphic, kind of putting the whole concept of a creative campaign together. So that's what you learn along the way. But what you're saying is the missing piece is the cultivation for just being a creative person in general, which is the juice that delivers the magic a lot of the time.
Look, I like to come up with these possibly naff phrases for things, but as you were just talking then, is brilliant. You said the tools.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's the tools, and then there's the fuels.
Yes.
Copyright that little one. Anyway, but this is it. We give people tools, but we don't give them fuels. What good is a Formula One race car if you've got all the equipment and the team ready to go, and there's no fuel in the tank? And I'm telling you,
or no driver.
Or no driver. But mostly we're talking about a person that is true, there's no driver. Yeah. So that is actually when we realise what fuel, and I understand a lot about psychology. I love people mechanisms and understanding the mind. It helps me in what I do, and helps me in working with people. And different people need different fuel. But the fuel I know and am very passionate about is high octane creative fuel. Yeah,
so I mean, I guess this brings us on to the next topic, which is around like the industry, and that's around, especially it starts off with juniors coming into the role, and you've probably seen tons of juniors and young people come into the creative industry, and it is very much, a lot of ways it's like sink or swim. So it's sort of like, this is the marketing industry, you've got X amount of clients, you've got to perform, go do it.
Yep.
And it's usually like, the ones that survive are the ones that can put up with that level of stress.
Yes.
And multitasking and being sort of pulled in different areas. But then if you're not cut out for it, effectively you're just going to get another job, or you'll eventually get burnt out or leave, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, what's your thoughts on how people can deal with that situation, Because usually they kind of vent internally, so you don't want to build a culture where it's a bit poisonous, right?
That's
so
right.
how do individuals deal with that sort of situation?
Well, that's a very good point, because I've always been one to... I've got a sixth sense about what's going on in people. So a lot of times when I was working in teams, people would come to me and telling me their challenges, and it's never about it's about tackling that challenge head on. It's not about bitterness or in-house kind of, I don't
bickering
like
and
that.
Stuff,
it's not that. It's about support.
Yes.
It's about camaraderie. I've always kind of considered myself a frontline general. I get in the trenches when my teams had challenges, and we'd take on a project, and I'd think about what effect it would have on them as human beings
Yeah.
and myself
Okay.
and the business. But I would be happy if it was going to put people under pressure. I'd get alongside them and I'd be working just as hard. So that's my belief, is the camaraderie in the support. We're in a tough industry. It's anything like this. It's competitive. It's challenging. There's time restraints. There's all sorts of crazy things. And that's the good thing, is I understand what it takes to be on that front line. But what you're talking about is new people coming into that, and it's the first experience. And so if you may not have the resources or the in-house persona that can come alongside and support these people.
So a bit of leadership.
It's
in a way.
leadership.
Yeah,
It's something else. There's something else. It's akin to HR, but it's much more than that.
I guess it's also
a-
listening
yeah.
and hearing what they have to
Absolutely.
say, and also understanding them. Yeah.
And you have to have someone that's resonant with the business side, but also the heart. Like that's so much. If people who've done branding projects with me will know, and this is truly from my being, I operate really well in here, but my best space is in here. This is my heart, my gut, the mojo. And so every project I do with clients is so much better because I get to the heart of it. We're all humans.
Yes.
Same with teams. So people that are struggling need to be heard here, and you can't just listen here. But it takes a space and a free rein environment to allow that out.
Yeah.
So sometimes what happens is it's not appropriate to talk about that with others, because you can spread the panic or the concerns, and that can work, but to a point. So having an external person that is also maybe not tainted by what's going on, that can be terrific. That's what's happened with other people that I'm involved in mentoring as well. I have perspective, and I can come in with a helicopter view and look at it a certain way and frame it differently. When you're so in it, you don't always see that. Also, they get to know, that's in confidence, that they can say something about someone and it's non-judgmental. It's just, you need to let it out, because if you don't, it festers. It makes people sick, actually. And then you're wondering why they got more time off, or they've just constantly just a bit flat.
Yeah,
or
the work's not quite
the
up to
work's not
standard.
there,
Yeah.
and to push them actually does the opposite. So I think that's what's really happening, is realising that through an external support person that really gets them and hears them.
And they can
also
voice their
knows,
opinion.
and they can
Yeah.
voice and talk about things. But the difference is, because I've been in the industry and I know exactly what they're talking about, it's not like another coach going, "You're amazing." It's like, no, I know you're amazing because I've seen other people, and I actually know you can be like quadruple amazing.
Yeah.
Because I've seen this in you, and in the reality of what you do in your role, I know what that looks like, and we can work on that specific.
Yeah.
So then they get an instant effective feedback and a useful tool. So it's tools and fuels.
Yeah, cool. So the other thing I wanted to sort of talk about was, moving into more of the work and what we do as agencies and creative people. And that's, the power of communication, like in the digital world. So obviously branding's been around for donkey's years.
Yeah.
But now we're transitioning to a world where, we've got Zoom, we've got all of these gadgets and devices to connect with. And now, like, a lot of the time we'll be all sitting in a room, but we're using the chat to talk to each other, or we're slacking each other. We're using project management tools to communicate with each other. So it's all online, right? How do you balance that with the face-to-face? And how do you sort of see a good balance between the two, or do you think that as we move into this space, we're gradually just going to have to give up and kind of just be a bit more pragmatic with our communications? Yeah.
Oh, it's a really, really good question. And I guess, COVID's thrown us all into the kind of real life, science lab experiment.
It has, hasn't
of
it?
this.
It's super
We are
accelerated.
guinea pigs in this crazy thing. And I think there's a lot of learnings. I've always been one to believe in a hierarchy of communication's my thing. You can tell I love to speak. But the reason is because again, this resonance within me, this quality of communication is actually what I'm about. So whether that's in my work I'm doing, that is my job to be a visual communicator. But with human beings, there is a hierarchy, I believe, of face-to-face is king. There's a dynamic, it's quantum physics, there's a thing that's going on that is so much more powerful when we actually exist in the same...
and even from a client perspective, when we're talking to clients, like,
massive,
it's so much more powerful.
Massive. And the more, and so face-to-face is king. Next I would say would be voice to voice. Now that would be a phone.
Picking up the phone. And
Then the email and Slack and, well, actually I've got email because that's long form. That's the next level, and there's a real art to that. And a lot of the time that's what I'm actually working with the staff members on, how to craft that communication, because there's a massive breakdown at that point. You can use it for good, and there's ways with my psychology sort of and I suppose personality profiling that I use to sort of construct emails so they have more effective output. And but then the next level is Slack and text message and these really bite-sized pieces of comms. They've got their place.
They do.
But we have to be so careful. The generations have moved to less and less and less and less.
Well, I think it's also, if you look at the spectrum of those two, you know, from a face-to-face is high quality, but time intensive. You know, it's hard to pin people down. It's hard to arrange an appointment or a meeting. The other thing is texting and Slack. So it's time. That's saving a truckload of time, because you can just quickly get the answer you need without having. So it's that compromise between quality of communication and time. So there has to be a happy medium. There
does, and that is, I understand the reality of that. And I think Zoom's been a brilliant, well, you know, and all the other brands that do the same thing. Kind of a compromise in one form. However, again, that can still go long, and then when you've got multiple people, there's some pros and cons. But, and I know we may not always be able to do the physical. My work is global, so I have to exist with teams that are, you know, virtual, if you like. However, where there is time saving is in the quality of the communication. So I've also seen a massive waste of time, and not only that, waste of money, and then a project going like this, or a piece of information veering right off because of poor strings of communication that were 20, 30 pieces long, as opposed to one quality phone call.
And you often say that to staff. It's like, you know, all you have to do is, if there's an issue, sometimes just pick up the phone and call, because that can save you a truckload of time. Yes, you have to talk to the person, but you know, so it just it's a lot more effective.
But I used to also say, and you know, some of my team members remember this, especially if there's a problem or a challenge or when there's something difficult, a difficult discussion, we tend to move away. But in actual fact, the most effective is you move towards it. And I would say after three emails or written comms, if there's anything negative in it, you've got to just push yourself into that zone. And the fact of the matter is, the more you do that, the better you get.
The better outcomes.
But we don't. That's another thing that I teach, is actually how to have those difficult conversations. Because there's an art to that. And how to have better conversations and glean better information.
So I think that it's a balance of really working out when to be a bit more personal and to approach people directly, and then when to be efficient and use the texting and all that. So it's learning that over time, and I think this generation coming through, I
think it's a when and a how. I really think there's a whole I just think that as a tool in itself would be quite phenomenal in terms of, I'd love to test that as well, for effective and not just communication, but the effect on the business and the successful outcomes. We were talking earlier off camera about the challenge of selling in an idea, a creative idea, or a concept, or a campaign, or even a price. Right? That's a big. There's loads of people that have never been taught that. Well, you don't actually, it's rare unless you've really studied it. That's something I've become highly adept at because literally of tens of thousands of hours of it and a natural wiring. But I help the people that I work with and mentor to develop those skills as well, because that can make you money.
Yes.
And save you money and save you time and make the project 50 times better. So there's something...
It's so true.
It's just... It's so hard to measure, and we looking at it with the wrong lenses if we think that was a half-hour conversation that is worth $180 an hour with 4 people in it. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's that metric to look at.
Did you put it on the timesheet? Yeah.
Did you put it on the timesheet? Oh,
yeah.
Right. I get why you don't want big meetings. I understand people, but that's just about the quality. It's back to quality.
But that meeting created that conversation, which inspired the idea, which created a whole bunch of work, which
absolutely
led to so many other things.
If I could give you moments in time from my past of the dollars generated, and not and the dollars, it's all these what I call the immeasurable equities. And I was actually hoping to do a sabbatical in the UK and sort of develop a framework with a guy or some people in Oxford there to actually map this. Because if you think about, this is the optimizing. And I mean, the word optimizing actually doesn't have an end point. Just remember that, because we never meet our true potential, and that's a fantastic thing. But we can go up at notch or 50. But if you are optimizing in that environment, if you can have good conversations that are inspiring with the right people in that, you're doing all these multiple things. You're fueling the creatives or the creative mojo. You are taking that problem that you're solving to another level that if you jump to the first solution, it may not be as profitable for that client. It may not be as effective for their target market. There's a myriad of things that come out of that. So that, how do you measure that?
Yeah.
And that was because you spent half an hour longer? Or that person that actually had their say and that little idea now feels really valued.
Yes.
So next time they're doing a job that's outside of the meeting, they're doing it at a better level. And what's that worth to your business? Or heaven forbid, they even stay and don't cost you what it costs when you lose a staff member.
Yes.
So you sort of see the dynamic of it.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I guess like from our perspective, we're a pure digital agency, as you know, but a lot of our training and culture is based on efficiency and speed. So I think that the speed factor is what's changing the dynamics of the workplace in the marketing industry. Because before you still had to get campaigns out, but you had that allowance for creative thinking and cultivation within a team and coming up with concepts and throwing ideas. But then with this digital world that we're moving into, we've got to do lots of ads basically. If you're running a digital campaign on Facebook, for example, we could have 30 to 40 different ads running within a month. And it's about the testing. So it's about running lots of different ads and testing to see what sticks on the wall, what works, what doesn't work, turning things off and optimizing as you go along. So it's like fast fail sort of approach. Sometimes you can get to your outcome a lot quicker if you fail a lot more. So you increase the speed.
You see what's working.
That's right. So it's that's the strategy essentially, but it's doing it in a clever and looking at the data, I suppose.
Yes.
Whereas with the creative process, it's let's not worry about the data. Well, we want to worry about data, but what's a great way that we can connect our campaigns with an audience? How can we get the emotion of the audience? How can we feel? And that requires time to think and nurture the brand and protect it as well. So often creatives have to protect the brand.
Absolutely.
So I guess it's that the issue of speed and time, which is what digital is doing, versus creativity and creative teams who are artistic but in a way have a priority to protect the brand and be custodians of the brand.
Yeah. Yes.
And make sure that it keeps the integrity, and it also can generate growth and structure within the business. So it's that balance between the two, isn't it?
Absolutely. However, can I just make a bit of an adjustment there in the language, because there is an assumption that creativity slows things up.
Yes.
Right?
And that's it's
that
the
is
fight
not
between
really
the two. Yeah.
what I'm talking. That's what I've come to realize. That's not really what I'm. That is the misnomer we need to. In certain environments, there is slow creativity, and there are types of creativity that time is the kind of nurturer of.
Yes.
So there is.
Yes.
But
I
again,
agree.
we're back to the commercial environment, the space I've worked in for 30 years, where you need to be high octane creative in a relatively time frame, a restraint, a budget, whatever. So what I'm really passionate and clear on now is back to the Formula One analogy. Create drivers that are excellent drivers, so you can still get optimized performance by an elite person with those skill sets. So that can still have speed. This is where I'll try and put that in slightly less verbose terms. If you spend time up front or invest in supporting that creative and optimizing them, this is assuming most of the work I do, remember, is with talent of a certain level or a certain experience. It can still work with juniors, but I think the real runs I've seen it's like I attribute it to Federer still has a coach.
Yes.
Right? It's that sort of level.
Yeah.
So working with people to optimize their ability to trust their creative instincts, so that they're making those decisions quicker, and they're responding, and they're even able to have ideas quicker and go like this quicker, and then come back to a solution quicker.
Yes.
That's actually what's happening.
Right. Yeah. Sure. So it's like the speed in which they come of their creative thinking and how they utilize it.
Yes, and we get faster at that when we learn to listen what's going on inside ourselves as a creative, listen to those messages, we optimize it, we feed it. Good creatives naturally spend their whole life absorbing creative input. I can't turn it off. Everywhere I'm looking, I'm picking it up, and we build creative libraries. And they're at home, and they're looking at things on the net, they're at traveling, they're absorbing it, they're talking. So it's how we actually access all of that, and also, if they're not getting stimulated, they've got no resource. So there's so many reasons why when you build these sort of fuel repositories, if you like, into their life, they can tap into that quickly. It's almost is like that octane boost.
Yeah.
The nitro kind of kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, going on your Formula One analogy, I think, and also around what you mentioned about time.
Yes.
I think the issue is knowing when to be, I guess, extra granular about the creativity.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, like, for instance, if you're running the Formula One race, you're spending a lot of that time up front to make sure that all the parts are right, everything's well, you're planning the car, the engineering, the design, everything. There's a lot of work that goes into that.
That's right.
But once you're racing, you're if you go into the pit stop, you don't want to be in that pit stop for 20 seconds.
That's it.
You want to be in there, in and out. So I guess that's the thing when it comes to marketing and creative campaigns. It's knowing when to turn on that level of granular creativity. Not perhaps when a campaign's running, let it run and let go.
Yes.
But then the upfront work should be there to make sure that it's...
I think you're really getting to the crux of it now.
Yeah.
And that is core to how I work on brand strategy projects.
Yes.
So I will do the deep thinking first. Then that means, and it looks like it's taking longer, but in the long run, I've built that pit crew with it's the brand pit crew. And if you haven't trained up those people and they haven't worked together long enough as a team, how can you expect speed? Also, you know, as an individual, they have to understand what the tools they've got of that brand. So you can't suddenly say, oh, here's a logo, here's colours, there's no backstory. Well, how can I even... That's why it takes longer, and that's why it's ineffective.
Yeah.
Because I haven't even driven this car before, and actually it's an old clunker that needs... You know, and I'm on a Formula One racetrack. Ridiculous. And that's what a lot of people have got, brands that are just old clunkers. So, you know, and I've got a car.
Yeah.
That's not a brand.
Yeah.
You know, so it's I'm talking about two things now, which is optimizing brands and
then teams
and teams at the same time. But that's the work we're in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think that's a really, really good point that you bring up, so that then you can get that speed when you need it on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like going into that whole creative equity thing that we discussed before, which is around, you know, adjusting ad copy on a campaign, on a digital campaign, versus building a brand which is long term and valuable. So I think really the answer to that is really about the timing and making sure the team's well prepared.
Yes.
In a creative sense.
Invest up front. Make sure that the depth work is done first.
And know where to draw the line.
And where to draw the line.
Yeah.
And also I'd say, you know, if we go back to the analogy of the pit crew, don't subby people in on something that they don't know about. So don't expect someone to have the speed and the accuracy and the effectiveness if they don't know what the rest of that sort of foundational thinking is. So, you know, the crews that work together for a long time, and they know what everyone else, that, you know, might be the other people involved in the project, whether that's even the client or the project lead or there's a whole lot of people that go into any of this work. It's often not just one isolated person. So they should be, the speed comes from them working together well, but all being on properly briefed is just too narrow a word, but essentially properly briefed, but also optimised to work together. So you think of the training those pit crews have. It's phenomenal.
Before they even start.
It's phenomenal.
It's
and
huge.
There's no way they'd dream of, if they want speed, suddenly pulling some guy in, you know, who hasn't done that rigorous training. So, but I think you know, obviously there's degrees of that's kind of the end goal. But that's where the speed comes from, and understanding why you're there for the client, why you're there, the brand, purpose, promise, the whole the personas, and doing that properly. Because how can you expect to do this effectively or properly if you haven't done that?
And the thing is, I guess if you're still fussing over the micro things, it means you have to go back and do that properly
that's the other thing. And you're dead right, so true, because then when we make judgment on the metrics that are coming out of those campaigns, I suspect there's a whole nother layer of metrics that aren't being looked at. And it's coming back to those team members delivering it, that layer we talked about, but exactly this, are the foundational brand messaging tools there and brand messaging framework, has that actually been done? Not just done, has it been done well? Has it been? And everything I do in brand is about actually understanding their customer. And a lot of brands understand who they are and what they do, but they don't necessarily really understand the head, but more importantly the heart of their customer. That's where it starts to kick in.
And that goes to the next topic, which is around that linear versus creative thinking. Because creativity is almost like problem solving in a way.
It is, yes.
And which linear is more, you know, process driven. I guess because we're in the marketing industry, we naturally attract creative people to the role within our agency. But then because we're pure digital, they also have a linear side of the brain as well. So in actual fact, that's a core value for us when we hire new people. We can't hire someone that's purely linear or purely creative. They have to kind of have a little bit of both, which is rare. Not everyone has that. It's not, and that's what we've come to realize, is that that's a very unique
We're looking for unicorns. I know
Yeah.
all about it. No, it's true. But there
I don't
are
like the
quite
word unicorn.
No,
but-
there's no. I know unicorns. But I get the point is, there may be just these. They are unique. It is a unique combination. A lot of the personality profiling, studies I've done for many years, and also experiential learning of that through real human beings. Proves it. It's so hard, and that comes back to talent acquisition, which is a whole nother layer of all of this too. So don't expect to just pick someone with a CV and then with this just because they've done that at university or elsewhere doesn't necessarily mean A, they're good at it, B, that they're suited to it, or C, that they can deliver it in the way you want, right? So there's a lot. That's a whole
for that linear versus creativity, I mean, there has to be the balance. But I think from a creative, because you worked in the creative space, you've worked with creative people in the agency environment. They need that tangent, don't they? They need
it. That's a very.
It's a requirement.
Absolutely. So that is exactly this sort of seems paradoxical, but it can coexist, and that's what I've become very good at. I call it left and right brain. Obviously, strategy and then the creative delivery, but also through a process in a time that's got to be scheduled and mapped and all the rest, so that you have got delivery, at key points. The thing is about how do we. Yep. So you've identified what's needed, and it absolutely can exist. How do we then find that in individuals and work on it? I mean, there's systems that can also support that. And it's a tricky one, because sometimes you get elite talent in one area or the other, and then in certain roles in the business, one might be slightly weighted more. Say a production manager role might be someone who's really good with systems and processes. Doesn't have to be a sort of, but they still have to be able to do what I call breadth as well as depth.
Yes.
And that's the challenge I used to often talk about. So how do we kind of go across everything in the helicopter view and then kind of go deep? Because depth is actually where you get quality as well, right? So you never want to.
And that often happens in the digital space. Like in our space, it's because it's a tacked on thing sometimes.
Yes.
Digital is a tacked on thing because you kind of everything else is prioritized. And then it's more about breadth. Oh, we have to do the Google ads, and we've got to do the SEO and the Facebook and the website and the landing pages and all this sort of stuff. If one person can do all that, then that's great.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you
can't operate well like that.
You need to have depth in each of those areas to really. Now you do anyway, and we're seeing it. Yeah. So I think that's the balance, isn't it? Yeah.
And I've seen that with team members in my own role as well. When I can do breadth to a point, but then if it's too wide, it erodes the depth. And that's where
if you're giving them too many
and
things,
that slows things up.
Yeah.
So it's this little balancing act of the two axes.
Yep.
And then you need team members or people that can support this. But it's not, because it's hard to find people with talent and ability to do both, because in a commercial space, that is what we're talking about. It's just a matter of being very rigorous with knowing you need that and you only employ that, as opposed to thinking, they're kind of 50%, let's just, and then they'll figure it out. It just doesn't work. It actually doesn't work.
Yeah. Oh, no worries.
So
Well,
I think,
thank you so much.
Some cool
it was
things
a really cool discussion. That's the end of the podcast. I've run out of questions.
I hope it sort of helped and
it's
opened
really
up
good.
some.
So how can people find you? How can they know about you? And,
well,
what's your number?
My phone number?
No, just joking.
My email. Oh, look, they can email me. I'm on LinkedIn and Juliet Street, and so it's probably the best way to contact through that. I mean, email is just juliet@creativemojo.co,
awesome.
not .com.
And I'll tag your name in the post as well.
That's great. But awesome. I'm always happy to have a conversation with people, and I love, hearing what challenges are, and it's really about let's get the best out of an industry that we actually all love.
Yes.
And that's my passion. Want to work with the people I love, doing the things I love in the way that I love, and you can actually get love and work
business
together.
and business together. Yeah, it's the heart 100%. and the math.
Yeah, you can. Well, there's no point doing it if we don't enjoy it.
Yeah,
it really
I love
is
it.
there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Hope you enjoyed the episode. Please subscribe to the YouTube link below, and we'll have more podcasts coming around the topic of branding and marketing as well. So thanks for your time, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks.